Welcome back to Product Market Fit, a podcast about startups, technology, and growth. I'm your host, Moshe Poltrak, and this is part 2 of the AI-focused Mashup series. In last week's episode, we focused on foundational discussions about transformers and Chat-GPT, how AI startups are thinking about competition and moats, and how investors are approaching the space. Today's episode continues the topic with a focus on how generative AI is affecting content marketing and search, augmented analytics, ethical considerations of AI and regulation, and finally touching on AGI and the singularity. Feel free to use the chapter marks in the episode description to jump to specific topics if you'd like, and check out the full episodes if you haven't already listened to them. As I've been reviewing these past episodes to put together this mashup, I am overwhelmed with gratitude to all of the amazing guests that have joined me and shared their knowledge, perspectives, and experience. And of course, huge thanks to you for joining me on this learning adventure. I'll be back next week with a fantastic new episode where I'll be interviewing a founder who's quite literally building the stuff of sci-fi. Make sure to bookmark or subscribe to the podcast so you get notified when new episodes are released. Hey, we're in this together. As much fun as I'm having producing this show, this is a shared journey, so I absolutely love to hear your feedback. Let me know what you think of these mashups or any other feedback on how I can improve the show. Hit me up at hello@pmfpod.com or find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. The Product Market Fit podcast is brought to you by growth.co. That's growth without the O.co. Growth offers fractional CMOs paired with best-in-class digital marketing execution to support early-stage startup success. With a focus on seed and Series A companies, Growth has helped a number of SaaS, digital health, and e-commerce startups build their go-to-market function and scale up. To learn more and book a free consultation, go to growth.co. That's grwth.co. Now, let's get started on the topic of content marketing and SEO in the age of generative AI. Here's Derek Osgood, founder and CEO of Ignition.
It's already changing it pretty drastically. I think realistically, over time, I think most marketers, or when it comes to content, are going to almost just end up becoming operators of AI. And we're going to be more kind of the strategic arm and relying on tools like GPT-3 to generate, most of the content itself. There's still, it's still not perfect, and it's still at a point where right now, I think if you're using AI copywriting tools to generate content, you're getting content that's okay, but it's already being penalized by search algorithms. It still needs a lot of human touch in order to make it like 10x and differentiated and content that's really likely to rank highly. But it's incredibly good when you need to generate, a massive amount of volume around, like say you need 500 variants of an ad because you want to be able to do a bunch of message testing. It's great at doing that. And I think over time, we're going to start to see more and more weaving of the content creation tools married to tools that inform that through strategy and research. So, you're going to start to see end-to-end AI tools where they can look at all of your customer insights that are gathered from all your support tickets and everywhere else, summarize that into segmented thematics of like what messaging resonates with people, translate that into outlines of like what does a content strategy look like that might lean on this message to capture interest, and then take it one step further and actually create that content itself. So I think that whole workflow is going to, eventually get very automated. And it's probably going to be sooner than we think too. It's already getting pretty nifty, and I think 1-2 more year cycles out, GPT-4, GPT-5, like you're going to start seeing those kind of use cases really get solved well.
Now here's Hikari Senju, founder and CEO of Omniki.
Obviously, SEO is going to change, right? In the sense that you're not gonna when you ask a question to Google, you're not going to necessarily get less links anymore. You're going to get some kind of answer, but that will link to pages. Google will link. They will, because at minimum they're going to link it to their other pages. They're going to link it to their YouTube so that they can make money from the ads from YouTube, or they're going to link it to their hosted, the web pages that host their ads, so that they can then make money that they're losing from the search. The SEM. The SEM revenue they're going to lose, they're going to try to recoup it from their ad networks, both on YouTube and their blog posts and pages, right? So they're going to link to those pages. But therefore, the way that these links get recommended in a generative AI world is going to be different. I mean, partly it's going to be it's going to be SEO based. Google does, is going to rank who is the biggest expert in a certain to answer a certain kind of question, or the most relevant to answering a question, and they'll link that page. There'll probably be a preference for pages that have their ads, but not, there's a long tail of questions that may not have their ads, in which they're still going to potentially link those pages, or maybe just pull the pages, summarize them, and just show it. So it's I think a lot of this is going to be up to Google. Like, it's not necessarily like it's Google's way of indexing the web. And so I think, the way they recommend the links is going to be different. When they recommend the links is going to be different. But a lot of that is still to be determined. And a lot of it is still up in the air, I think. And then there's a lot of regulatory things as well, right? So hard to say. But SEO, obviously, as we all can agree, is going to change. And the ROI of SEO also dubious. Like, what is the it might have made sense in the early 2000s to invest a lot in SEO to make sure that your page was ranked because everybody was using Google to Google search to discover the web. But going forward, when there's a lot of competing chatbots that you have your own chatbot that's doing tasks for you and answering questions for you, the way that the web is categorized is going to change. And so
it's interesting. I was talking to a friend who's has a digital marketing agency, and I was sharing something similar, that the future of SEO may not be optimizing to users, it's optimizing to bots, right? To user agents. And also conversion rate optimization will also follow a similar path, where if I can just tell my agent, my bot, to, hey, get me a pair of shoes, it knows my preferences, knows my size, and knows my style, it'll go find, a deal and go through that process on its own. It doesn't need a human intervention. So that experience on the retailer side is very different.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the default search engine that you choose to include it when the bot is searching the web is going to matter. And then also, bots don't buy products, so like the ads potentially that get shown to those bots also, again, that changes the potential monetization of search as well. So presumably bots ignore the ads. I think it's gonna be very interesting. But to your point, I mean, I think for now, when we're all programming agents, the agent still does, for us at least, we're programming agents to do competitor research for our customers. We have this feature that does spawns an agent that does competitor research for the customer sign up for our business to help them with their creative strategy. That is currently done on Google, and so therefore the way that the links are ranked definitely matter. But again, what is the potential long-term validity of search when nobody's clicking SEM links? Then how is that going to work? Because the bots aren't clicking the links like the ads. So those are going to be I think longer-term implications. But for now, I think SEO does matter even in this kind of intermediary and agent world.
Pascal Weinberger is the founder and CEO of Bardeen.ai. I released a double episode with him back in January.
It's actually kind of interesting, I think, because SEO feels like it has been a numbers game in the sense of how many backlinks can you get, how much content can you produce, how many other sites do you get linking to your link internally, and so on. Inherently, it's been a numbers game, which kind of made it that bigger companies had advantages. If you could have an editorial team of 50 people writing content for you all day long, like HubSpot, Zapier, etc. have, like, if you look at their LinkedIn profiles of the companies, I mean, we did this ourselves, kind of like doing the market research. A way larger number of people working at those companies than you would expect are writers. It's almost like a movie or like a newspaper studio. So I think from that perspective, there's always been this thing that bigger companies just inherently have an advantage. And AI, to some extent, I think can level the playing field a bit. So in the sense that now, instead of having to hire 10 writers, if I'm smart, I can use tech like GPT-3 or other models that are out there. There's a lot of companies that are specializing on copywriting that built on top of these AI platform models to make it easier to interface with it and so on. So it kind of levels the playing field a bit. which is exciting. It's always good for companies like us, startups, to use that new technology. Typically takes larger companies a bit longer to adopt it, so it gives you this time advantage. On the other side, it will, as a user of the web, where already I'm not the biggest fan of Google because of, ads and various different reasons. I'm much more on like DuckDuckGo and other search engines. Like, friend of mine, Richard Socha, has his own search engine, u.com, that I love to use. It's like way less ads and all this stuff. So I think from that perspective, it's already kind of a dying field in a sense. I think if you ask me 3 to 5 years from now, we're not going to be using Google for search anymore. I mean, it's like maybe a bold statement to make, but
that is a very
I think
bold statement.
At this point, it's fairly obvious that the search, the way we use it today, is already broken, and it will be different. I don't know how exactly it will be, but I think it'll either be one of these new platforms that doesn't necessarily entirely rely on ads for revenue, but it'll be like smarter about it, or it will be in a more conversational way, which I think there's a bunch of companies that are doing this already. Perplexity AI and a bunch of others that are using a Chat-GPT style interface for you to query, and then it gives you summarized information. You can ask follow-on questions. There's still a lot of things that are wrong with these platforms because they kind of try to summarize based on models that don't actually have a fundamental understanding of the systems and so on. So it's kind of correlation-based summaries instead of actually like someone who understands the topic. But I think they can get there, again, to my previous point of, scaling those large transformer systems over the next few years. I think we can get to a point where those systems will scale, and now it's just a question of time. And then as those systems scale, we will become better at interfacing with them. And then there will be a much more intuitive way for me as a user to understand and digest information. That's more of a, if I'm talking to a professor in a field, us talking about SEO to an actual SEO expert, he doesn't throw us a bunch of books on a table and says, here's the data, figure it out yourself. We ask questions, he gives us answers. That's the way we're used to digesting information. I think we can get there with search at some point. So that's something I'm excited about. And that will kind of almost make this whole using AI to generate content question obsolete, because at that point, it's no longer a numbers game. It's much more like quality. How do you actually interface with those things and so on? I think there's going to be this period for the next 2 to 3 years where it's kind of weird, where like quantity still matters a lot because of the existing paradigms. And you can produce quantity easily with, systems that generate text and articles for you. So there'll be a lot of noise. The systems will catch up, like Google. I think that they will catch up with it, and they will find a way to detect if a text is, or at least partially detect if a text is AI generated or not. OpenAI itself is talking about fingerprinting texts. So there's various techniques you can use to fingerprint a text, like have different spacing, work frequencies, etc., that you can use to label that I generated this text. And then search engines in turn can disregard it and maybe just completely ignore it or weigh it differently or something like that. So I think there will be mechanisms built around it, the same way that people build mechanisms around just link farming today, where it doesn't actually work that well because you need actual links that are content related, where Google looks at the content of the page that links to you and your page, and it checks, does it actually talk about the same thing? If not, then it doesn't matter. I think it's going to be an interesting time, and I'm optimistic that we'll figure out systems for this noise that will be created. And I think long term, the paradigm will change completely to something that's much more useful for users.
Next up is Tom Tolley, author of the recent book Generative AI, How Chat-GPT and Other AI Tools Will Revolutionize Business, as well as a number of other titles, including Artificial Intelligence Basics, a non-technical introduction, Implementing AI Systems, and the Robotic Process Automation Handbook.
There is a shift towards, natural language prompting, and also the expectation that, content can be created and not just text, but images and down the line videos. So, there's so many different use cases for that, where a traditional search engine obviously is not going to do any of that for you. And then the other problem is, as Google implements these systems into its own search engine, that makes for a better experience. But the cost of delivering this technology is so much more expensive than traditional search. So, you got to create these supercomputers, the data centers. I mean, it's really multiples more expensive than it is, to doing a single search versus a chat completion prompt chat completion. So so it's not just the potential threat of losing revenue, but also the costs, and that's putting pressure on margins. And at the end of the day, Google's powered by search and that ingenious model that just throws cash like no one can believe. And then even with these new systems in place, you don't have the links. You can have links, but it's if a lot of that content is created and it's satisfactory, you're not linking off to other sites, so you're losing that revenue opportunity. So maybe there's more like banner ads or something, I don't know, on these, or like what OpenAI has done, where they have a paid version of Chat-GPT. Maybe there's a paid version of BART as a way to help monetize it. So I do think, it's kind of this, asynchronous, unconventional warfare that's going on, where Microsoft's an advantage because they're not cannibalizing their business. They can do these experiments, and Google can as well, and they are, but they're going to suffer, both pressures on the cost side and the revenue side. So it's definitely going to shake things up, and already has. It's such a huge market, and for Microsoft, it's a huge opportunity. The irony is that I think there's a lot of people out there who think Bing is a new product. They don't know it's been around for a long time. It's just such a minor piece of Microsoft's business. But I suspect it'll be a growing part of Microsoft going forward. And
back to Hikari on his perspective about the future of advertising in the age of AI.
I think there'll always be a market for advertising. People like free things. And so as long as people like free, the humans have a bias for free things. And so as long as people have a bias for free things, there's always going to be a market for advertising to monetize those free things. And then, people like attribution. So there will always be performance. I think there'll be more and more performance and attribution related advertising, not less, because, things you quantify are getting more and more every day. And then I think the advertising itself just performs such an important function in generating demand in a capitalist world to bring new products to market, educate consumers about new offerings, that I don't think advertising is going anywhere. And then also just the profitability of these auctions, like these attention auction systems, is such that all these things. I think actually digital advertising revenue is predicted to grow pretty increasingly, actually. I think 8% year over year or something like this over the next year, and then continue growth. So digital advertising is continuing to grow as an industry, and I think that's just going to continue especially now. If we enter this world, right, where now we have the the VR AR glasses, right? Now there's an infinite number of places where you can now post ads, right? And if everyone is entering a world where everything's they're all wearing goggles, and the potential monetization vector space of that universe is infinitely larger than just us looking at our little phones and our little screens, right?
Let's shift gears, as generative AI has been getting all the attention. However, it represents just a small subset of the field of AI. Here's a clip from my conversation with Sean Burns, founder and CEO of Outlier.ai, on the topic of artificial intelligence and augmented analytics.
So augmented analytics is a general term that Gartner coined, which refers to any application of machine learning to analytics. And so we talk about AI. AI and machine learning, are they the same thing? That's a philosophical question. But in general, any sort of machine learning algorithms applied to analytics is augmented analytics. But that's a huge market that includes lead scoring, which is a form of machine learning applied to analytics. It includes all sorts of other things, anomaly detection, trend detection, even any chart where you have it automatically add a trend line is using machine learning and is technically augmented analytics. So it's a very large term for a big space. Outlier.ai operated in what we called automated analysis, this idea of tools that connected data sets and pull questions out for you. So instead of giving you the answers, which is what dashboards do, I would pull questions out. And there's lots of approaches just in there, lots of approaches, lots of products, lots of people doing that. It's changed a lot. I think when we were starting Outlier, people were very skeptical of AI. They didn't really know if they could work. It sounded like science fiction. Today, whether or not you're talking about generative AI or self-driving cars, people have seen the potential of AI. They're generally willing to accept it can do a lot of amazing things. And that's a big deal. It's a lot easier than to sell them those products. The problem, though, I find is that most times when people are trying to create augmented analytics products, they think that people will buy them because they're AI. And something that's universally true is people don't care. They care about the value that they get. If your AI tool does something for them they can't get anywhere else, that's great. I'll take that every day of the week. But just because it is AI is not a good enough reason for me to buy it. In fact, there was a whole generation of what we used to call machine learning as a service platforms. These would be like the equivalent of Amazon or Google Web Services, but for machine learning applications. And they all failed. And why they failed is they went to customers and said, here's all these machine learning you can apply to stuff. And the customer said, cool, what should we apply it to? And they're like, that's up to you. Just apply to stuff. And what you learn very quickly, going back to our talk about go-to-market, is you can't outsource to your customers figuring out how to use your product effectively. It's just not a good strategy. So whether or not you use advanced tools like generative AI and large language models are using neural networks and deep learning, or just back to basic regression models that you use in Excel to create trend lines, those are both forms of machine learning. And which one you use does not matter. What matters is what value it generates for the end user and can they find it somewhere else. And it turns out the thing about AI also is that it's easy to use AI to make a product that's 10% better than something else, but that's usually not enough. It can't just be 10% better because then the switching cost of moving off what I was using to your fancy new thing is just not worth it. It has to be radically better than what I'm using today, substantially better in so much as it's totally different. So there have been AI tools that help people write for many years that never were largely adopted. The difference between that and things like Chat-GPT is it does all the writing for you. So it isn't 10% better at writing. It's 1,000% because it writes for you. That's how much better these things have to be for people to adopt them. And by the way, it's not just true of AI, any product. If you want people to switch from their product to yours, it has to be better. But with AI, it has to be that much better. Because the other side of AI is not perfect. There's a reason why OpenAI is focused on creative pursuits like generating images and art or writing natural language. Even using something like Copilot from GitHub, it's not perfect. In fact, it makes lots of mistakes. It still requires a person to look at it. So AI works best in applications where you're augmenting a human doing a job, not where it's doing the job for the person. There are some exceptions like high frequency trading and real time bidding networks for ads, but for most applications, it does better if a human is in the loop. And the human's hopefully your customer, not on your team. It's very expensive to have on your team, but a human is there helping them make better use of it. And that's true of augmented analytics too, right? You wouldn't want an AI system today, even if it was good 80%, 90% of the time, looking at your data and making decisions for you, because what about that 10% of the time it's wrong? So you have a person in the loop who's going to look at the results of your augmented analytics system, its predictions, its insights, whatever it's coming up with, and they're going to decide what to do. And today, in 2023, that's the model that works. In 10 years, maybe it changes.
As you know, I'm very bullish on AI, but it's not without its risks. The most immediate, of course, is job displacement, a topic that brings out divergent responses from different folks. Here's Tom again, as well as Tony Beltramelli, founder and CEO of Wizard, and then Hikari.
I still think it's down the line. I don't think it's in the near future. I do think it will happen, that there'll be widespread automation of jobs. And we probably won't be prepared for it. I mean, that's just the reality of it. You know, our society has been geared to deal with, certain things for so long, and we're not really good at reskilling or educate. And our education system has issues. But I think ultimately, when there's no jobs to be done, I think it does go against our nature and how we've evolved over time, where we are very competitive, and we try to outdo everybody else and achieve certain things. And if that's gone, then I do think that creates a societal conundrum. I don't know what that means or how that impacts society, but It'll be a huge transit. It'll be a very difficult and wrenching transition. That's for sure.
It's a tricky question because I guess it's really like at the end of the day, it's leadership decision. If my team can do 10 times the amount of work, I'd rather keep my team that can do 10 times the amount of work instead of just firing half of them. So I think it's a leadership decision ultimately to make that call, because if you can produce more with the same amount of people, you are in a much better position to outcompete your competitors, gain market traction. You can do more. And if you are scaling down your team, you are always at risk that, well, they might actually still use AI to quadruple their productivity but not fire anyone. So I will be at a disadvantage. So I'm kind of a strong believer in the free market when it comes to this, which is like, the best companies are going to win. And the strategy that they use internally, whether it's just to keep the same team but have them all use AI augmentation, if this is what is working and bringing company to the top, then I think job security are going to be safe for a while. And on the flip side, if people get fired, as you mentioned, it has gotten so much easier to start software businesses that I do hope that more people will take a bet on, hey, I have this cool idea that I've been thinking about for 5 years. Maybe it's time for me to try it out. Because again, like the cost of starting things out now has gotten so low that the risk is also significantly lower. So it's a bit scary, and there will be for certain some job security issues, but at the same time, I'm really hopeful that it will ultimately help people create more values with the amount of time they have in the week.
It's really interesting. I read this news recently that there are actually today more people working in PR this year than they are prior to Chat-GPT, right? It's like people talk about Chat-GPT and generative AI replacing PR jobs and marketing roles. There are actually more marketers now, more people working in marketing. Why is it? Because AI empowers marketers. AI empowers PR people. It creates more leverage for them. It helps them actually create more value and drive more productivity from their work. And so if they can increase their productivity, then there's more demand for their jobs. If you can get one, where else you need to have 10 marketers to do 1x of work. Now, each marketer can do 10x work. I would hire, that means 10x more revenue, 10x more customers. I'll hire more. I'm going to hire more people who can do those things. And so, I believe that generative AI and AI is a democratizing force. I think it empowers humanity. I think it's going to create more jobs and displace jobs. And again, if you can improve the productivity of certain kinds of work, it will only increase the demand for those kinds of jobs. Yeah, like I think we're gonna live in a more creative world. We're gonna live in a more innovative world with more compelling products because it's democratizing everything. It's democratizing the ability for any startup to build AI products and go to market and enrich their experiences with AI. That means us as consumers benefit in a myriad of ways, from using digital products to genetics to medicine to healthcare to everything. And then, if the ROI of all these things improve, then there's gonna be more demand for them, as well as create new kinds of jobs, right? Like, today maybe it's labeling and prompt engineering. Tomorrow it'll probably be other things, but like it's also going to create new categories of jobs. So, but yeah, I think it was really interesting this particular metric that there are actually more marketers. There's actually been like a growth in marketing roles over the past year. In spite of the whole generative AI craze, is actually a reflection that. It actually creates more jobs and empowers more of these more jobs and people than it displaces.
Care to predict how it will change the structure of marketing teams in large mid-sized companies, large organizations? What new roles are needed, and how are roles going to be looked at differently with the power of AI?
Yeah, I think marketing is going to be turned from more of a kind of a cost center and like a brand oriented thing into really more of a revenue driver and performance. It doesn't, and this is something we, one of the things we tell our customers is, you used to have a huge team of salespeople to do direct emails and cold calls. It's not very effective anymore, right? And in fact, the ROI of, say, hiring a salesperson, like a seat, to send a cold email, like what is the cost of an impression, right? To see like an email headline from a sales rep, the cost of hiring that rep to write that email and send it to you, pretty expensive, right? What is the cost of showing you an ad and then having you click on that ad? It's substantially higher ROI than and then the ad can actually also be attributed and directly be correlated to sales. And actually, the ad can be much richer in terms of the way it communicates an idea to you, communicates a value prop to you. And so I actually think marketing departments probably get larger. I think we're going to see potentially more marketing taking over a lot of the sales capabilities. And obviously, it's going to change. The nature of marketing is going to change as the ways in which humans communicate with each other changes. But demand generation is a core component of capitalism, and that's not going to go away anywhere anytime soon. There's always going to be new innovative products, and there's always going to be a need to communicate those new products to new consumers, and so I think also again you have smaller teams be able to market earlier, and then you have larger companies be able to market much more sophisticatedly.
If people are going to lose their jobs, whose responsibility is it to take care of them? This is one of the questions I posed to Dr. Reed Blackman, AI ethicist and author of Ethical Machines.
I don't know. I'm not convinced you've got massive responsibilities in that context. I think it might be when you don't really know what you're going to displace. You might just wind up augmenting the workforce instead of replacing the workforce. Maybe. I don't know. But I'd have to think more about this. But I don't think if you're being innovative, you're not creating a product that's otherwise unethical, but it is a product that may put some people out of work. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that you've got any special obligations. I don't think you have any obligation to smash the machine, so to speak, in order to make sure that doesn't happen. I don't think you have an obligation to, say, work towards upskilling the workforce that will be displaced or left out of work, and then upskilling them so that they can get new jobs. I don't think you have an obligation to do that. It would be a morally, ethically good thing. But I think it's going above and beyond the call of duty to do such things. That's different. Yeah, things might be different, though, if it's government. So, government responsibilities vis-a-vis unemployment due to automation, they might have different responsibilities than, say, the startup does, precisely because of the function of government is to, among other things, think it is anyway, this is controversial, but to keep people, or to doing what it can to keep people from falling below a certain level of...
Provide a safety net.
Something like that, yeah.
So the responsibility for taking care of these displaced workers falls in the lap of government more than does in the corporations that are creating this technology that's causing the displacement.
I think that also falls on the people whose job, there's some extent to which, of course, they bears personal responsibility for having to figure out the next thing. But look, I might not say something like it's the government's responsibility to figure out what to do with these unemployed people. I might say something like, and maybe there's just difference in phrasing, so I'm just trying to make it prettier, but it's the government's responsibility to be the guardians of the welfare of society at large. That's sort of the broadest conception of government that I've got, to take care of the welfare of society. I think I can be pushed off this conception, this just sort of me trying something on. And that's going to have something to do with, I think, writing some kind of safety net. So for instance, I don't think that government should completely turn a blind eye to the homeless. I think that they should do something or other and it has to do with ideas about it's just below the level of human dignity to live in such a way. And when a country has such and such wealth, to just watch those people wither is ethically abhorrent. So what exactly are their obligations with regards to those who are unemployed due to automation? I don't know that I have anything special or urgent to say for that very particular situation. That's probably more of a fine-grained policy discussion that I'm not prepared to have. But do I think that something about the function of government speaks to the need to make sure that people don't just wither and die? Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we've got government.
I also asked Reed whether using tools like Chat-GPT represented plagiarism because of the way their knowledge base is trained.
So I'm going to say something similar to what I said earlier, which is that I'm not going to get worked up over the term plagiarism, just like I didn't get worked up over the term ethics. Is it plagiarism? Is it not? We can battle about the boundaries of the term plagiarism. I think there's just a different way to ask that question, which is, I think, more ethically to the point, if you like. So I take it that, let's go with image generation. There's loads of artists out there, living and dead. Their art is online. They've got pictures of that. The company took that information about what their style is, what their pictures look like, et cetera, didn't ask permission for it, and then trained an AI to be able to generate things in that same style of the artist, and then gave that capacity to a third party, say you and I. I don't think that, I'm inclined to think that by itself, that's not terrible. Not yet. So someone said this to me, it's a sort of common thought. Isn't this just the same thing as like you and I are art students and we see all the pictures of Picasso, and so we start practicing creating Picasso paintings in our apartments or our studios, or if it's not Picasso, some contemporary artist, right? XKCD, I can start making XKCD comics. I know what they look like. Not that hard to draw. And I think the answer is, ethically speaking, nothing's wrong with that. But if it's a commercial context, if someone creates a tool without XKCD's permission, the author, I forgot his name, without the author and illustrator of those comics, they didn't ask the creator. And if they create a tool that lets me create comics in that same style, and it's a commercial purpose, it's actually going to sell me access to this thing. And then I'm using it also for commercial purposes. Either I'm making comics and I'm selling them in that style, or even if I'm just like, I've got a restaurant that I want XKCD style thing and I put it in my restaurant to add to the feel of the restaurant. It's a commercial purpose. Once you add that, what's happening is you have the creators of DALL-E or Stable Diffusion or whatever not asking permission from the artist to use it in certain ways, and then someone else is going to use it in certain ways that they haven't approved of for commercial purposes. Then I think, okay, so how's the artist being treated in that circumstance? In that state of affairs, how are they being treated? And I'm not exactly sure what term to use here, but something like exploited or used or taken advantage of, something there I think is appropriate. I don't know about legally, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know about IP law, but something ethically shitty has gone on. I don't know if it's plagiarism, I don't care how to use that term, but something really ethically problematic has gone on because the work of this artist has been, if you like, unilaterally used and exploited. Not only is it an opportunity that they have, but it's also arguably to the detriment of the original artist whose work is now being used in ways that might also devalue their work.
On the topic of who owns content generated by AI, here's Rusty Turek, founder and CEO of PEX, sharing the nuances of AI and copyright law.
Yeah, this is a very complicated topic. Here is one parameter that is very important to keep in mind, which actually I think is very beneficial to the way that it's structured. In the United States, something generated by computer cannot be copyrighted. So that means if you produce a comic book, which is actually something that was just decided against a registration just literally this week, if you create a comic book and the whole comic book is written by AI, you cannot register that comic book. So when you think about Spider-Man, right? Will Spider-Man has been not around if it was purely generated by AI and it couldn't be copyrighted? I do think that it will have been around, but I don't think it will have been as franchised as it is, right? And so I do think that from this perspective, this is very beneficial because it disincentivizes people from abusing the system too much, right? So meaning, if you cannot make money beyond kind of the initial creation on the content that was created by AI, then it disincentivizes people from abusing it too much. So for instance, you say, I really like Jackson Pollock's style of paintings. There's a difference between I want to have a painting like that at home and I will print that from this generated content to saying I'm going to start printing these out and selling them in galleries, right? Like those are two very different things. And so I think generative AI is very helpful and very valuable to the humanity, especially as a tool, right? So this was a huge discussion about the electric pianos, electric guitars, right? Like when is the end where the machine does more than the human, right? And the kind of the sentiment is landing still on the fact that if a human is required for an input, that on its own has value, then the work is valuable, right? So because the way that we pursue culture at the moment, it's very unlikely that AI is going to get much past on this.
We talked about ethical considerations, but what about regulation? Here's Tom again, as well as Yaniv Makover, founder and CEO of Anyword.
By the way, China has also implemented its own in fact, they're the first country to implement regulation of generative AI, especially for deepfakes, things like that. United States, we have some privacy laws. Different states have some privacy laws, but that's about the extent of the regulation here in the United States. We're a bit of cowboys, laissez-faire, until there's some huge crisis, and then we have regulation like Sarbanes-Oxley, or for the what happened after the late 90s with Enron and so forth. We had regulation after the financial crisis, after the Great Depression and the crash of the stock market. That created the Securities and Exchange Commission. So I would not hold my breath that we're going to get regulation anytime soon in the United States. The only thing that's different this time is that there is bipartisan support for it, because it's such a broad impact on society, or potentially a broad impact on society. It doesn't, for now at least, there doesn't seem to be a Democrat or Republican, liberal, conservative view on AI. That could very well change, but so far it seems like that hasn't been the case. But I do think there usually needs to be some catalyst to make that happen, or else things just usually don't move in Congress. And we're going into election year too, so usually you don't want to rock the boat before election year. So I think it'd probably be some time until we get regulation in this country. I think it'll be mostly self-regulation from the big companies like Meta and Google and so forth.
And the cynical view is that these companies are pushing for regulation as a competitive moat, that the big guys always are benefiting from regulation because they help to write it, and they make the barriers to entry higher for startups and people coming into the space.
Definitely, there's truth to that. Absolutely. And there's always the possibility of regulatory capture, where the special interests have all the money and resources to guide it certain directions.
I think if you're talking government regulators, I think they're still trying to solve social media, right? So I think that's changing the world. And I'm not, I think most people agree, not in the best way. Yeah, it has changed the world, not in the best way, not in the way that people thought, 15 years ago, where the internet is going to democratize information, everybody's going to have access, and it's going to be great. Now they're all going to be better for it. And now, everybody has their own set of information and they're exposed to that. And I think that's way more profound than somebody using AI to do what they couldn't do. Like, you could hire a writer, and it's not that expensive before, or you could hire lots of writers. I'm not. So how government is going to regulate it? Some problems are hard. I don't see this is getting sorted out by regulators or government. I think technology is going to just move forward really fast, and then the job market, business models are going to have to adapt. People are going to have to adapt, and like every disruption, some good things will come out of it, some bad things. I think this is the same disruption that computers had. Some good, some bad, but ultimately more good than bad, right? The efficiency increase was very beneficial to everyone. And yeah, there's some bad actors using it the wrong way. I'm more concerned about the effects of information bubbles and social media and stuff like that, where that's just hasn't been solved yet, and we're still kind of trying to understand how to deal with that.
To close us out, let's jump into the exciting and scary world of AGI, or artificial general intelligence, and the singularity. Here's Alexander Dereder, co-founder and CTO of Inc., as well as Pascal again.
There's new branches sprouting here and there near the top of the tree. And you're like, oh, hey, we never thought AI could do that. And so keep training those models, and these branches start blooming and getting bigger too. And all of a sudden, you can use these multimodal AIs in new, fascinating capacity. And that eventually, Moshe, is where you get to general artificial intelligence. Because at some point, these intelligences can do so many generalized tasks that, we can start thinking of them as a general intelligence.
Oh, I don't think that GPT-4 will reach AGI just yet, but we're definitely on that track.
The problem with this statement is that nobody quite agrees on what that G stands for. And in one definition, at least, you could say Chat-GPT already passed the Turing test. In another definition, you could say that a multimodal AI, because it does more than one thing, is by definition general. And so in one definition, at least, you could say AGI is already here. So AGI, is it truly here? No, it's not here. Is it sentient? No. Things like that, right? But we are getting scary close. And so AGI will arrive much sooner than anybody thinks, but it'll also be less scary than anybody thinks. And the versions that we think about in science fiction, true sentient AI, that's almost human-like in its intelligence, that is still ways out. But we don't need such type of AI to radically change the world. In fact, if we stopped innovation today, you have enough source material here with what's already released to completely change everything we know in the world.
I like to not comment on that question. It's so out there. But I always challenge people who ask this about, we already have systems that are way better than humans are at any given task. I'm bad at keeping
at
time,
specific tasks,
as you can tell. Yeah, but or even like Chat-GPT at this point, you could argue any large language model out there probably knows more than I do about most fields. There are very few things that I might know a little bit more, but maybe actually not. Maybe I just think I know it better and more data on it. But the whole question for me is singularity would be that system defines its own goals, which is something that actually, we're not even trying to do that. I don't know of any single large model or large company that's trying to build a system that's trying to figure out its own goals, other than in very specific research settings where, again, the goal is well defined. So I don't know. I don't buy this Hollywood singularity version of robot overlord, taking over humanity and type of thing. I don't really subscribe to that. I think of AI much more as a tool, same way as we already have computers and networks that span the globe and very great servants of the purpose that they were built for. The same way, I think AI will be a great servant of the tools that we built it for.
That's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening. I recommend you go back and listen to some of these episodes in their entirety, as they are each fascinating in their own right. As always, I love to hear from you, so please share your feedback at hello@pmfpod.com. Tune back in next week with a fresh new interview that you don't want to miss. Until next time, wishing you rocket ship success in your startup journey.